The alarm went off in the control room of the ISV Horizon at exactly 3:17 a.m. Earth Standard Time. Commander Allison Wells had just finished her coffee when the radar operator called her over with urgency in his voice. "Commander, you need to see this," said Officer Paul Davis, pointing at his screen. Allison leaned over and felt her breath catch. The object was massive, at least 3 miles long, and it had appeared seemingly out of nowhere near the rings of Saturn. It wasn't there in the previous scan just 4 minutes ago. "Run all scans. Full spectrum analysis," she ordered, keeping her voice steady despite the racing of her heart, "and get me a direct line to mission control." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. The strange vessel made no aggressive moves, but simply held position. When it finally sent a transmission, the message was simple. "We come. In peace and friendship. We are the Viridians. First contact." After centuries of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, they finally had their answer. Back on Earth, President Gregory Barnes called an emergency meeting of world leaders. The UN Security Council chamber was filled with tense faces and hushed voices. "Ladies and gentlemen," the president began, "how we respond in these next few days may well determine the future of our species. We must be careful, measured, and above all, united." Dr. Frank Morrison, the world's leading expert in linguistics and cultural anthropology, was quickly appointed as head of the newly formed First Contact Commission. His job was to establish communication and build a framework for peaceful relations with the aliens. "The key," he explained to the president in the Oval Office, "is to show respect without showing fear. We want to appear confident, but not threatening. Curious, but not naive." The president nodded. "Do whatever it takes to establish peaceful relations, Doctor. The last thing we need is an interspecies incident." Over the next few weeks, the Viridians moved closer to Earth, eventually establishing orbit around the Moon. They sent a smaller vessel to rendezvous with the International Space Station, where the first face-to-face meeting took place. The aliens were tall and slender with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the light. They had 4 arms and large dark eyes that blinked sideways. The head of their delegation called himself Crestfall, as a name humans could pronounce. "We have visited many worlds across the stars," Crestfall explained through a translation device. "We seek to share knowledge and build friendships with different life forms." The meeting was broadcast worldwide, and humanity watched in awe as gifts were exchanged. The Viridians presented a small device that could purify water instantly, while the humans offered art, music, and literature as representations of Earth culture. Not everyone was convinced of the aliens' friendly intentions. Admiral Pamela Rodriguez watched the broadcast from her office at the Pentagon with a deep frown on her face. "Notice how they deflect questions about their home world," she said to her aide. "And they've been vague about how many ships they have or where they're located. Something doesn't add up." But her concerns were largely dismissed as paranoia. The public was enchanted with the visitors, and politicians were eager to benefit from the technological advances the Viridians promised to share. The aliens requested permission to establish embassies in major cities around the world. The UN quickly approved, and within months, sleek blue-silver buildings rose in Washington, Moscow, Beijing, London, and other capitals. Dr. Morrison spent hours each day with Crestfall, learning about Viridian culture and sharing human history. The aliens seemed particularly interested in Earth's resources, population centers, and military capabilities, questions that Dr. Morrison answered openly in the spirit of friendship. "Your species is remarkably adaptable," Crestfall commented, during one of their sessions. "You've survived despite your fragile bodies and short lifespans." "We're resilient," Dr. Morrison replied with a smile. "And we have a saying, what doesn't kill us makes us stronger." Crestfall tilted his head. "An interesting concept. In our culture, obstacles are meant to be removed, not overcome." Such subtle differences in perspective were noted in Morrison's reports but never flagged as concerning. After all, these were beings from another star system. Some cultural differences were to be expected. 6 months into the diplomatic relations, President Barnes hosted a grand reception at the White House to celebrate the new alliance. Representatives from all nations attended, along with a dozen Viridians who moved through the crowd with graceful, fluid motions. Today marks a new chapter in human history, the president announced in his speech. Together with our friends from the stars, we will build a brighter future for all people of Earth. The crowd applauded enthusiastically, and cameras flashed as Barnes and Crestfall shook hands. Or rather, Barnes shook one of Crestfall's 4 hands, while the alien placed another on the president's shoulder in what had become their customary greeting. Later that evening, Admiral Rodriguez approached Dr. Morrison on the terrace. "Have you noticed that they never mention other species they've encountered?" she asked quietly. "Don't you find that strange?" Morrison sipped his champagne. Perhaps those experiences weren't relevant to our situation. Or perhaps those other species aren't around anymore to tell their side of the story, the Admiral replied. But such concerns continued to be overshadowed by the excitement of new technological developments. The Viridians helped improve Earth's satellite systems, offered medical advances that cured several previously untreatable diseases, and provided more efficient energy solutions. Humanity was careful to present itself as respectful, intelligent, and worthy of the Viridians' friendship. World leaders stressed the importance of putting humanity's best foot forward. Incidents of protest or xenophobia were quickly contained and downplayed. "We represent all of humanity now," President Barnes reminded his cabinet frequently. "We must be on our best behavior." As the 1-year anniversary of first contact approached, Crestfall requested a private meeting with the president. "My people are pleased with the progress of our relationship," the alien said. "We would like to invite a delegation of humans to visit our nearest outpost in your solar system." The president smiled broadly. "We would be honored." "Where exactly is this outpost located?" "We have established a presence on your planet Mars," Crestfall replied. "We hope you don't mind. It seemed an efficient location for our research operations." The president hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Of course. Mars has been a target for human expansion as well. Perhaps we can collaborate on colonization efforts." "Yes," said Crestfall, his dark eyes unblinking. "Collaboration would be most beneficial to both our peoples." What neither the president nor anyone else on Earth knew was that the Viridian outpost on Mars was actually a massive military installation, and it was just the beginning of their plans for the solar system. 6 months after the revelation of the Viridian outpost on Mars, life on Earth continued with an uneasy sense of normalcy. Most people embraced the technological benefits the aliens had brought. New medical treatments saved thousands of lives daily. Clean energy systems reduced pollution in major cities. Food production increased thanks to advanced farming methods. But in a small, unmarked office building in Houston, NASA engineer Darlene Hughes stared at her computer screen with growing concern. "It happened again," she said to her colleague, Eric Delgado. "Another satellite glitch at exactly the same time as yesterday." Eric rolled his chair over to look at her screen. "Could be coincidence." Darlene shook her head. "Once is coincidence. Twice is suspicious. 5 days in a row is a pattern." She pulled up a map showing the locations of the affected satellites. They formed a web around strategic points on Earth, major military bases, power grids, and water treatment facilities. "Someone is mapping our infrastructure," she said quietly. "And I don't think it's us." Eric's face paled. "You think it's the Viridians? Who else has the technology to interfere with our satellites without being detected by regular monitoring systems?" That evening, Darlene took her findings to her supervisor, who promised to pass them up the chain of command. 2 days later, she was reassigned to an unrelated project and told not to discuss her concerns with anyone. But Darlene couldn't let it go. She reached out to Eric, who worked in cybersecurity, and they began meeting after hours to continue their investigation. "Look at this," Eric said one night, showing her his laptop. "I've been tracking data transfers from all the facilities with Viridian technology installed. There's a pattern of information flowing out, not just the data they're supposed to be collecting." "What kind of information?" Darlene asked. "Defense systems, power grid details, water supply maps, population data." Eric looked up at her. Everything you'd need if you wanted to control or target a planet. They decided to take their evidence directly to Admiral Rodriguez at the Pentagon, bypassing the regular channels that had shut them down before. The Admiral listened carefully to their presentation, her face growing grimmer with each slide. "I've had my suspicions," she admitted when they finished. "But the political pressure to maintain good relations is enormous. President Barnes has staked his legacy on this alien alliance." "So we do nothing?" Darlene asked in disbelief. "I didn't say that," the Admiral replied. "I'm putting together a team to quietly prepare contingency plans. I want both of you on it." Meanwhile, at the Viridian Embassy in Washington, D.C., botanist Lisa Jackson walked through the indoor garden that had been created to study alien plant species. The Viridians had shared samples of flora from their world, supposedly as a gesture of friendship. Lisa had been given special permission to study these plants for potential medical applications. As she collected samples from a blue-leafed shrub, she noticed a Viridian scientist enter a room that was usually off-limits to human staff. The door didn't fully close behind him. Curiosity got the better of Lisa, and she slipped in after him, hiding behind a large storage unit. The room contained numerous holographic displays showing detailed maps of Earth. The Viridian was speaking to another of his kind in their native language. But thanks to the translation technology she'd been exposed to over months of work, Lisa understood enough to be alarmed. They were discussing resource extraction zones and population management areas. One display showed a global map with regions marked in different colors. The red zones were labeled Initial Clearing. Lisa's hand trembled as she used her phone to secretly take pictures of the displays. She needed to document this before going to the authorities. Just as she was about to slip out, she knocked over a small container. The noise was enough to alert the Viridians. "Human," one of them said, turning toward her hiding spot. "Identify yourself." Lisa ran. She burst through the door and sprinted down the hallway, hearing the aliens calling for security behind her. She made it to the embassy's main entrance where Keith Martinez, a human security guard, was on duty. "Lisa? What's wrong?" he asked, seeing her panicked face. "Keith, I need to get out of here now," she gasped. "I saw something I wasn't supposed to see." Keith hesitated for only a second before making a decision. He had been growing uncomfortable with things he'd witnessed while working at the embassy. The way the Viridians spoke about humans when they thought no one was listening. "This way," he said, leading her to a service exit. "My car's in the back lot." As they drove away from the embassy, Lisa showed Keith the pictures she'd taken. "Jesus," he muttered. "What do we do with this?" "Admiral Rodriguez," Lisa said immediately. "My friend Darlene said she's the only high-ranking official who's been questioning the Viridians from the beginning." When they reached a safe distance, Keith pulled over and called a friend who worked at the Pentagon, arranging an urgent meeting with the Admiral. That same evening, President Barnes was hosting Crestfall and other Viridian officials at Camp David. The mood was pleasant as they discussed expanding the alien presence on Earth. "We'd like to establish larger facilities in several regions," Crestfall explained. "They would serve as cultural centers and technology hubs." "Of course," the president agreed readily. "We can fast-track the permits and land acquisitions." His aide's phone buzzed with an urgent message. The young man looked at it, then whispered to the president, "Sir, Admiral Rodriguez is requesting an emergency meeting. She says it's a matter of national security." The president frowned. "Tell her, it will have to wait until morning." "With respect, sir," the aide persisted, "she's used the Broken Arrow protocol. She wouldn't use that unless—" Barnes nodded sharply, understanding the gravity of the situation. "Excuse me for a moment," he said to his guests, and stepped out. In a secure room, he took the video call from Admiral Rodriguez. His face grew increasingly troubled as she presented the evidence gathered by Darlene, Eric, Lisa, and Keith. "These are serious accusations, Admiral," he said when she finished. "Yes, sir, they are, and I believe they're accurate." The president rubbed his forehead. "I'll need to handle this carefully. The public has embraced the Viridians completely. If I make accusations without absolute proof—" "With respect, Mr. President, Rodriguez interrupted. I believe we're running out of time. Look at the orbital data. The Viridians have positioned ships at key points throughout our solar system. They've established a base on Mars without proper oversight. They're gathering strategic information about our defenses and infrastructure. All signs point to preparation for— Don't say it, the president cut her off. I need time to think about how to approach this diplomatically. When he returned to the dinner, Barnes maintained his composure, but he studied Crestfall with new eyes. The alien's smooth assurances now seemed calculated rather than friendly. Is everything all right, Mr. President? Crestfall asked. Yes, just a minor security matter, Barnes replied with a forced smile. Now about those new facilities you mentioned. As the evening concluded, Barnes shook Crestfall's hand with practiced diplomacy, all while thinking about the emergency session with his security council. He would call the moment the aliens left. What none of them knew was that the Viridians had already accelerated their timeline. The first phase of their true plan would begin in less than 48 hours. The emergency meeting of the National Security Council stretched into the early hours of the morning. President Barnes listened as intelligence officers presented more evidence of Viridian deception. Sir, we need to act now, Admiral Rodriguez urged. Every hour we delay gives them more time to position their forces. The president sighed heavily. I understand your concerns, Admiral, but I still believe we can resolve this diplomatically. The consequences of rushing into conflict with a technologically superior species could be devastating for humanity. With all due respect, Mr. President, Rodriguez replied, I believe conflict is coming whether we want it or not. Before Barnes could respond, his aide rushed in with urgent news. Sir, we've lost contact with the International Space Station and the lunar base. All communications are down. The room fell silent. These were the two most important human outposts, beyond Earth. Get me Crestfall, the president ordered. Now. But the Viridian ambassador was suddenly unavailable. All calls to the alien embassy went unanswered. 12 hours later, the situation became clear when Viridian ships took up positions around Earth's 3 largest space stations. A message was broadcast worldwide from the lead vessel. People of Earth, Crestfall's familiar voice announced. For your safety and protection, we are establishing a security perimeter around your planet. All space travel will now require Viridian approval. This is a temporary measure while we help reorganize your societies for optimal functionality. Around the globe, people watched their screens in confusion and growing fear. The friendly aliens had suddenly become an occupying force. In the White House Situation Room, President Barnes watched with his advisors as satellite images showed Viridian weapons platforms being deployed in Earth orbit. They played us perfectly, he said quietly. We welcomed them with open arms. What are your orders, sir? General Mason asked. Before Barnes could answer, another aide rushed in. Mr. President, the UN Secretary General is calling an emergency session. The Viridian High Commander has requested to address the General Assembly. 3 hours later, World EQ. Leaders gathered at the United Nations in New York. The mood was tense as Crestfall took the podium, flanked by 4 armed Viridian guards. Distinguished leaders of Earth, he began, his tone no longer warm but coldly efficient. Your planet has great potential that is being wasted by inefficient human management. We have studied your societies for months and determined that guidance is required. Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber. Effective immediately, Crestfall continued. We will begin implementing resource optimization protocols. Some regions will be designated for mineral extraction, others for agriculture, and others for human habitation. Your military forces will stand down and submit to Viridian oversight. The Secretary General stood up. This is an invasion. You presented yourselves as friends and partners. Crestfall tilted his head. We are helping you. Your species is too primitive to properly utilize this world's resources. This has happened many times before with other developing species. Those who cooperate thrive under our guidance. Those who resist— He paused. Well, resistance is ultimately futile, but also unnecessarily destructive. President Barnes rose to his feet. The people of Earth will never accept this. We extended our hand in friendship, and you took advantage of our good faith. Your politeness was interpreted as weakness, Crestfall explained calmly. Your accommodation as submission. This is the natural order of the universe. The advanced guide, the primitive. As if to demonstrate their power, the main screens in the UN chamber switched to a live feed showing a research vessel attempting to leave Earth orbit. It was the ISV Darwin, commanded by Captain Jordan Williams, with 47 scientists and crew members aboard. This vessel is departing against our security directives, a Viridian voice announced over the feed. On screen, a beam of light shot out from a Viridian ship. The research vessel exploded in a ball of fire. Screams erupted in the UN chamber. This is regrettable but necessary to establish boundaries, Crestfall said over the commotion. Comply with our directives, and no more lives need be lost. President Barnes stared in horror at the screen, then at Crestfall. In that moment, something changed in his expression. The diplomatic mask fell away, replaced by cold determination. He walked slowly to the podium, gently moved Crestfall aside, and addressed the assembly. Today, we have witnessed the true face of our so-called friends, he said, his voice steady despite his anger. We extended our hand in friendship and were met with contempt. We showed restraint and were shown cruelty. He looked directly at Crestfall. As of today, our polite diplomacy ends. Back in Washington, Admiral Rodriguez received the coded message she had been waiting for: Gibraltar Falls. It was the signal to implement the contingency plans they had been secretly developing for months. Across the globe, military units that had been quietly placed on standby began to mobilize. Scientists who had been studying Viridian technology in secret labs switched to weaponization protocols. And deep beneath the lunar surface, in a facility unknown even to most of Earth's leadership, Captain Daniel Garcia powered up engines on a fleet of ships that had been built using reverse-engineered alien technology. This is not what I hoped for, Garcia said to his executive officer, but it's what we prepared for. In the Viridian Embassy in Washington, Lisa Jackson and Keith Martinez had remained hidden, gathering intelligence. Using the embassy's own communication system, Lisa sent detailed information about Viridian physiology and technology vulnerabilities to Admiral Rodriguez. Their environmental suits have a weakness, she explained in her message. Their skin can't tolerate high levels of ultraviolet radiation. They've been genetically engineered for space travel, but it made them sensitive to certain light frequencies. Meanwhile, Eric Delgado worked with a team of hackers to infiltrate the systems that the Viridians had integrated with Earth's infrastructure. They discovered backdoors that could be used to disrupt alien communications. The Viridians, confident in their technological superiority, had grown complacent. They believed that humans would quickly accept their new role as a subject species. They had encountered many civilizations before and had refined their approach to guiding less advanced species into serving their empire. What they failed to understand was that humanity's politeness had never been born of weakness. It had been a choice. That night, as Viridian ships patrolled Earth's orbit, President Barnes addressed the world from a secure location. My fellow citizens of Earth, he began, today we face the greatest threat in human history. We have been deceived by those who came to us claiming friendship. They believe us weak because we were kind. They believe us primitive because we welcomed them peacefully. His eyes hardened as he continued. They are about to learn how wrong they are. Humanity will not bow. We will not surrender our world or our freedom. And when this is over, let the stars remember, Earth is not a prize to be taken. It is our home, and we will defend it to our last breath. Across the globe, resistance cells activated. The fight for Earth was about to begin. 3 days after President Barnes declared the end of diplomacy, the real war began. For 72 hours, a tense standoff had existed while both sides prepared their forces. The Viridians believed they were simply allowing time for humans to accept their inevitable defeat. They were wrong. Admiral Rodriguez stood in the underground command center, surrounded by screens showing military leaders from around the world. No one cared about old rivalries or borders anymore. Earth had become a single nation with one enemy. Operation Thunderclap begins in 30 minutes, she announced. All units confirm readiness. One by one, commanders from every continent reported their forces were in position. The first phase of humanity's counterattack was about to start. In her lab at MIT, Olivia Sanders put the final touches on her quantum virus. For months, she had been studying the code embedded in Viridian technology that had been shared with Earth. She discovered a pattern that suggested all their systems were connected to a central network. This should never have worked if they were being careful, she muttered to her assistant. They got sloppy because they thought we were too primitive to understand their tech. Olivia typed the final command and pressed enter. Across the globe, all Viridian devices simultaneously received a hidden signal. The virus spread through their network like wildfire. In orbit, Viridian ships suddenly lost power. Their weapon systems went offline. Communication channels filled with static. The aliens had never considered that humans might have planted a backdoor in the very technology they had so eagerly accepted. Ryan Cooper watched from his position inside the New York Viridian embassy. For months he had posed as a friendly liaison officer, gaining the trust of the aliens while secretly mapping their command structure and security protocols. Now he activated a network of sleeper agents who had been placed in every Viridian facility on Earth. At the same moment across the globe, these agents disabled security systems and opened doors for the Special Forces teams waiting outside. Remember, non-lethal methods if possible, Ryan said into his radio as he disabled the embassy's alarm system. We need prisoners for intelligence. The assault teams moved in with weapons that fired concentrated ultraviolet light. The beams didn't kill the Viridians but caused them intense pain and temporary blindness. Within an hour, every Viridian embassy on Earth had been captured. In space, the real battle was just beginning. Captain Daniel Garcia led the secret lunar fleet out of hiding. These ships had been built using a combination of human ingenuity and reversed-engineered alien technology. They were fewer in number than the Viridian vessels, but they had one critical advantage. Surprise. All ships, engage targets as planned, Garcia ordered from the bridge of the lead vessel. Remember your training. They think we're primitive. Let's show them how wrong they are. The Earth fleet struck hard and fast, targeting the Viridian command ships first. Garcia had studied their formation patterns and identified vulnerabilities in their defenses. His ships fired concentrated electromagnetic pulses that disrupted the aliens' shields, followed by conventional weapons that tore through their hulls. On the ground, Heather Powell led a team of former Special Forces operators in attacks against Viridian ground installations. They moved through forests and urban environments with practiced stealth, using their knowledge of Earth's terrain, an advantage the aliens could never match. They may have better tech, Heather told her team as they prepared to raid a Viridian research facility. But we're fighting for our home, never forget that. Not all of humanity's attacks were military in nature. Dr. Frank Morrison, who had spent months studying Viridian language and culture, now used that knowledge as a weapon. He broadcast messages designed to create confusion in the alien ranks, using their own cultural references and communication patterns to spread misinformation. Their society is highly structured, he explained to President Barnes during a secure call. They follow orders without question. If we can disrupt their command structure, many will simply wait for new instructions instead of taking initiative. The Viridians responded with fury to the human resistance. They launched attacks against major cities, but Earth's defenders had anticipated this. Civilian populations had been quietly evacuated from likely targets in the days before the attack began. When Viridian weapons struck, they found empty buildings and prepared defenses. Admiral Rodriguez watched the battle unfold from her command center. Reports came in from around the world and from space. Human casualties were high. Thousands had died in the initial clashes. But the Viridians were suffering too, and they seemed genuinely shocked by the ferocity and coordination of Earth's response. They expected us to surrender, she said to her staff. They thought their technology made them invincible. But technology isn't everything. 1 week into the war, a turning point came when Eric Delgado and his team of hackers gained access to the Viridian battle network. Using the aliens' own communication systems, they inserted false commands and conflicting orders. Viridian ships began firing on each other, unable to distinguish friend from foe. Meanwhile, in laboratories around the world, scientists worked day and night to adapt Viridian technology for Earth's defense. New weapons were deployed daily, each more effective than the last as humans rapidly learned and improved. The Viridian High Commander, now operating from a fortress ship in high orbit, sent an angry message to Earth's leaders. "Your resistance is both futile and unexpected," the alien declared. "We have conquered dozens of worlds, none have fought like this." President Barnes recorded a simple reply. "Those other worlds weren't Earth. We were being polite before. Now, you see us as we truly are." By the end of the second week, the tide had turned decisively. Viridian forces were in retreat across all fronts. Their ships were abandoning Earth orbit, pulling back to regroup near Mars. On the ground, the last alien strongholds were under siege by human forces who had quickly learned to counter their technology. In a secure facility in Colorado, Lisa Jackson continued her research into Viridian biology. The samples she had smuggled out of the embassy had proven invaluable. She discovered compounds that could neutralize the aliens' natural advantages without killing them, weapons that could end the war without genocide. "We don't need to destroy them," she explained to Admiral Rodriguez. "We just need to show them they can't win here." President Barnes addressed the United Nations again, this time from a position of strength. "The Viridians came to our world believing we would submit because we were polite," he said. "They mistook our diplomacy for weakness, our restraint for fear. That was their fatal error." He looked directly into the cameras, knowing his words would be translated and sent to the retreating alien fleet. "To all who watch from beyond our world, humanity values peace and friendship. We extended our hand in good faith. But make no mistake, we will defend our home with everything we have. Earth is not yours to take. Remember that before you follow the Viridians' example." The message was clear. Humanity was no longer being polite, and the stars would never forget it. The final battle for Earth's solar system took place near the orbit of Jupiter. 3 months of brutal fighting had pushed the Viridians back, step by step, from Earth to the Moon, from the Moon to Mars, and finally to the gas giant where they made their last stand. Captain Daniel Garcia stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Victory, watching as the combined human fleet moved into position. What had begun as a handful of experimental ships had grown into an armada. Old enemies had become allies, pooling resources and knowledge to build vessels that could match the alien technology. "All ships report ready, Captain," his second-in-command said. Garcia nodded. "Send the message to the Viridian command ship. One last chance to surrender." Minutes ticked by as they waited for a response. The Viridian fleet was impressive even in defeat. Over 30 large warships arranged in a defensive formation. "Message incoming," the communications officer announced. The main screen flickered to life, showing the face of the Viridian High Commander. Unlike Crestfall, who had adopted a friendly appearance for diplomatic purposes, this alien made no effort to seem harmless. His blue skin was marked with the ridges and scars of a veteran warrior. "Humans," the commander said, his voice harsh. "Your resistance has been impressive, but it ends here. We will not surrender to a lesser species." Garcia leaned forward. "Then you will die for your pride. This is your last warning." The alien's expression didn't change. "We have called for reinforcements from our home systems. When they arrive, your victory will turn to ashes. Surrender now, and some of your people may be permitted to survive as a subject race." Admiral Rodriguez, watching the exchange from Earth via quantum communication, gave the order everyone had been waiting for. "Captain Garcia, you are authorized to use the Sunflare weapon." The Sunflare was humanity's greatest achievement in the war, a device that could generate a controlled burst of plasma energy similar to a solar flare. It had been developed by a global team of scientists led by Olivia Sanders, using principles discovered in Viridian technology, but pushed far beyond what the aliens had achieved. "Sunflare armed and ready," reported the weapons officer. Garcia looked at the image of the Viridian commander one last time. You came to our world uninvited. You killed our people. You thought we would bow down because we were polite. That ends today." He cut the transmission and gave the order. Fire. The sunflare activated, sending a wave of energy toward the Viridian fleet. Their shields flared bright blue as they tried to absorb the attack, but the energy was too great. One by one, the alien ships lost power, their systems overloaded. "All ships, advance and capture," Garcia ordered. "Remember, we want prisoners, not more casualties." The battle was over in less than an hour. Most of the Viridian crews surrendered when they realized their ships could no longer fight. Some chose to self-destruct rather than be captured, but by the end of the day, the solar system belonged to humanity again. 1 week later, the Viridian admiral was brought to Earth for a formal surrender ceremony. The event took place in the rebuilt United Nations headquarters, with representatives from every nation present. President Barnes, who had aged visibly during the 18 months of conflict, stood tall as the alien leader was escorted in. The Viridian no longer appeared threatening, just tired and defeated. "You have bested us," the admiral said, his translator conveying the words in a flat tone. "In thousands of years of expansion, no species has done what yours has accomplished." Barnes nodded. "We could have destroyed your entire fleet. Remember that when you return to your homeworld with our terms." The surrender document was simple. The Viridians would leave the solar system and never return. They would provide reparations in the form of technological knowledge to help rebuild what had been destroyed. They would acknowledge in their records that Earth was not to be approached without explicit invitation. After the ceremony, Dr. Frank Morrison, who had studied the aliens longer than anyone, spoke privately with the Viridian admiral. "What I don't understand," Morrison said, "is why you thought we would submit so easily. Didn't your research show you anything about human history?" The alien tilted his head. "You appeared so docile, so eager to please. Your technology was primitive compared to ours. Your leaders spoke of peace and cooperation at every opportunity." "We were being polite," Morrison explained. "That wasn't weakness. It was a courtesy you failed to recognize or deserve." In the years that followed, Earth changed dramatically. The technology adapted from Viridian ships allowed humans to travel farther into space than ever before. The first colony on Mars was established within 5 years, named New Hope in honor of what humanity had fought to protect. More importantly, the war had united Earth as nothing before. Old conflicts seemed petty in the face of what they had overcome, together. A new global organization called the Solar Concordat was formed to coordinate Earth's activities in space and serve as a unified voice for humanity among the stars. President Nicole Bennett, who took office after Barnes retired, established the Concordat's guiding principle: "We prefer friendship, but we demand respect." 10 years after the war, Earth received its first message from a non-Viridian alien species. The Allurians were a peaceful race from a star system 30 light-years away. They had heard of Earth's victory against the once mighty Viridian Empire and wished to establish diplomatic relations. This time, humanity was prepared. Ambassador William Reeves led a delegation to meet the Allurians at a neutral location 5 light-years from Earth. The meeting took place aboard a human vessel, a deliberate choice to demonstrate Earth's capabilities. "We welcome the opportunity for friendship in exchange," Reeves told the Allurian representatives. "Earth has always valued peaceful cooperation between different peoples." "Yet you defeated the Viridians so thoroughly," one of the aliens noted. "They were feared throughout this sector of the galaxy." Reeves smiled. "We come with open hands and open minds. But know this, our civility is a gift, not a weakness. Mistake one for the other at your peril." The message spread quickly among the stars. Earth was open to visitors, trade, and cultural exchange, but only with those who came in genuine peace. The aggressive expansion of the Viridian Empire had been halted by their defeat at human hands, creating a new balance of power in that region of space. On the anniversary of the final battle, Captain Garcia, now Admiral of Earth's growing fleet, stood with Olivia Sanders on the observation deck of the orbital station Unity. Below them, the blue planet turned peacefully, showing no scars from the terrible conflict. "Do you think they learned their lesson?" Olivia asked, looking out at the stars. Garcia nodded. "I think the whole galaxy learned something important about humanity." "What's that?" "That we'll extend a hand in friendship to anyone who comes in." "Peace," he said. "But if that hand is slapped away..." He smiled grimly. "Well, we're not just being polite anymore." The Viridian conflict had taught humanity a valuable lesson. In a dangerous universe, true strength lies not in constant aggression, but in the capacity for both compassion and ferocity, and the wisdom to know when each is required.